everybody. Welcome to Discover Fort Smith podcast. We're a podcast that talk to people living in Fort Smith about what they're doing around Fort Smith. And today we are here with Cody Faber.
Hello.
He is our National Park Ranger over at the National Historic Site here in Fort Smith. And
one of my favorite places.
Yeah, it's
Me too.
one of our big attractions here in town.
Yes.
So let's talk about Fort Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Are you from here? Did you grow up
I
here?
am actually.
Okay.
I grew up just south of here, down in Hackett, Arkansas. But Fort Smith was always like the town. You know, we went into it, had everything. So no, this is home. I was born in it was St. Edwards at the time. So born here in town. My kids are born here in Fort Smith. And no, this is home. Fort Smith's always going to be my home. It's an awesome place. So I kind of swagger when I tell people I'm from Fort Smith.
Yeah, why? Why is that?
Oh man, where do we start? I mean, we were joking about this before that, you know, John Wayne made a movie about our town. Take that, everybody else. So no,
John who?
John. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh man.
Ooh, Cody's about to come up out of his chair over here.
Sorry.
There's a lot of Western fans that may watch this. Wait a second.
Josh is now
You
off the
just lost-
podcast.
I
This was the
know.
last
You
episode.
just lost
See you
cred.
guys.
Totally lost cred.
That's it. The kids don't know who John Wayne is anymore. Sadly, my kids do, but their dad's a history nerd, so it makes sense. In fact, my oldest can quote most of the shootout from True Grit on her stick pony, and rides the guns and everything.
my
So
gosh.
we're starting them young. But yeah, no, I swagger coming around saying I'm from Fort Smith. When I tell people all over the country, one thing working in the Park Service is, you know, we get to travel for work sometimes, but we meet people from all over the country, and people are like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from Fort Smith, Arkansas." Fort Smith. Of course, I see Fort Smith through a little bit different light, as not only is it hometown, but from the history standpoint of it.
Yeah.
I'll put us up against anybody. We've got so much history here and so many integral portions. The story of Fort Smith is very much a story of like 19th century America and what we went through, what we've become. You know, it's full of heroes, full of villains, and it's got a lot of cool stuff. There's a reason there's lots of movies, and you can't hardly read a Western book without Fort Smith being name dropped in here and there. So, but yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that story, like in a nutshell? Can you just give us like a
Fort Smith overview?
Yeah.
Oh man, yes.
history?
So our story, for as far as the town goes, you could jump back really the creation of this. They got the military here to begin with in 1817. You could really start in the late 1700s with the Cherokee being not forcibly removed, but kind of economically moved to this area. At this point, the force movement comes later. But they basically start butting heads with the Osage. And so the military is afraid that fighting is going to spill back over into Arkansas, and they don't want this to be a war zone because they got ulterior motives about moving the eastern tribes this way. So they sent the U.S. military in 1817. They stayed there to 1824. They go build Fort Gibson after that. And then 1830, you have the Indian Removal Act under Jackson, and then that's the forced removal process. Now you get all the tribes being removed to this area forcibly, and then different names for different tribes, but most of the time we call it like the Trail of Tears and stuff like that for the listeners who might want to know that. But anyways, so the second Fort Smith is built kind of on the grounds of that. They kind of want a way to kind of deal with that influx as the nations head this way, and possibly any problems that might cause, and be kind of a supply depot. So they built the second Fort Smith, and then that's here through the Mexican War, Civil War. It was both sides owned it in the Civil War. And then following that, you have all the crime and problems and stuff that takes place following all those issues, and social and economic. I won't get too highbrow and use too many big words or too many small words either, for that matter. It sounds stupid. Got to hit socioeconomic and say stuff like that. Remind people, yes, I'm from Hackett, but I've read books. But at the same time, I can say that I'm from here. But at the same time, it is then that kind of gets us into our second chapter of like what Fort Smith's probably most famous for as far as our history is like the Western time period.
She's losing.
I know.
Fucking me up.
Good. I'm glad. We deal with a lot of very difficult subjects at Fort Smith. The Trail of Tears, war. I mean, you could argue like cultural and almost genocide at times. I mean, there's a lot of rough subjects. So I have to use humor to balance that off. You don't make jokes all the time, but if I did nothing but talk about all the hard stuff, it would no one would want to come to my programs. They'd be like, well, that was depressing as crud. I don't ever want to go back to Fort Smith National Historic. But again, we've got those really high points, so we have to hit both sides. So anyway, that kind of covers like the last part, like, the True Grit stories, John Wayne, Rooster Cogburn, or really more historical, like Judge Parker and the Deputy Marshals, and stories about, all the different characters and tribes and people and that live here in the city, and then also go into the, Indian Territory, or what becomes Oklahoma, until basically we cover about 1896 at the park. So 1817 and 96, so about 80 years. And that's kind of our main gist of Fort Smith history about what I cover anyway. Of course, you might interview one of the folks at Museum of History. They can get you up more modern stuff, post 19th or post 20th century, talking about, the town growing and the community and the bridges and War I, War II, and all that fun stuff.
So whenever we say the National Historic Site, what does that mean? What are the buildings? What's the land?
That's a good question. So we have about 30 acres there downtown. So like our main visitor center was the jail and the courthouse, and then before that it was the barracks building for the enlisted men. But then outside you've got like the commissary building, which is our oldest standing building in Fort Smith. It's 1838. And you can go visit that. It takes good pictures. And then you've got like all the grounds and the little river trail that goes by the river and everything. So that's a big one, because a lot of people come and want to see the connections to the Trail of Tears, and they expect to see like a physical trail. And then they get out there and they're like, oh, where's the trail at? I'm like, oh, for us, it's the river. The tribes and come up the river. And so anyway, yeah, it's a unit of the National Park Service. That's another reason that Fort Smith's awesome. There's like, I think 425 or 426 national parks in the nation. And you have one of them downtown. I mean, come on.
That's pretty
phenomenal.
cool.
Yeah,
I mean, Arkansas has a lot of awesome state parks and quite a few national parks overall. But in this region, to have like a national park in your downtown, that's unheard of. And not only that, to have, probably the coolest one.
Yeah, exactly. You guys do offer some incredible programming.
Thank you. We are very proud of it. I mean, if you told me when I was a kid, like, we'll pay you to shoot cannons and ride horses, and talk to people about history, I'd have probably worked harder in school. I'd have done better things, but no, it's phenomenal. We love it. I mean, we do a lot of programs for obviously like school groups and youth and things like that, but a lot of adult programming, whether it be like, we have the courtrooms. We do night court trial reenactments, which
those are my favorite.
Oh,
me and my kids got to come out to the last
That's
one.
right. Yeah. We have a lot of fun with that. And then, so we take the original transcripts, we abridge them down, and then we play them out and reenact them. And so that's kind of cool to watch that. And then we don't tell the outcome until afterwards. And so we have the jury be just that, a jury, and they get to decide and debate, and then they come back in. And it's I don't know, you want to talk about people watching, and it's an interesting social experiment to watch what is historically was a slam dunk for the prosecution and like a 5-minute outside, and they're come back with a guilty verdict, to hear people debate about it now. I think in all the years, I've been there 16 years, and I think I've only got like one guilty verdict on a murder trial. It's just unheard of.
Oh, wow.
They want, videotape and DNA and a written confession and everything else. And I'm like, this is 1882.
Yeah.
I have to do those things. So, the written confession perhaps, but they weren't doing that either.
Super fun, interactive way to learn history.
It is. I always joke, it's entertainment, but I feel like I'm slipping in like vegetables into your in your casserole, and you just don't catch it. And people will be like, oh, this is really fun. Then I'm like, all right, now let's learn some history. And they're like, oh, yeah, this has actually happened, and these people were real. And so anyways, yeah.
I'm just curious, like, what's one of your favorite stories to tell?
I don't have so many. That's a hard question. Oh man. Well, I'll give you some high and some low. I mean, my high notes, you've got some really heroic people that were there. You have some of the tribes and some of their stories that are just, the fact that the tribe survived the Trail of Tears is pretty phenomenal to me. The fact that you have some of the folks that come in there that, create this city in a time that it was difficult to live. I can't imagine going without some of the modern technologies and things that we have now, but much less the cultural differences and everything and the safety that we have now. But you've also got some pretty funny stories. There's some weird stories and things that happen at Fort Smith. I think probably one of my favorite ones, not going to brag, but some of you might remember, Kevin Costner was here a couple of years ago. I think it's 2013 or 14. He came in, he's playing a concert over there in Pensacola, and he came for a tour at the park, and I got to give him a tour, which is probably one of the highlights of my whole career. and I told him a story. He cracked up, and it's true. There's a guy named Heck Bruner. He was a deputy marshal. He was on a horse, and he was on the ground. The guy who was arresting was on a horse, and he told the guy to dismount. He's under arrest, and the guy actually pulled a gun out and shot him. Didn't kill him. So the guy rode away, and he was trying to run, and Bruner shot at him. This is in rough. Came here for some light stories. I'm going to give you a rough one, but I promise it'll end funny. He shot at him and hit him, and it actually hit him and the horse. And he said he always felt bad about shooting that horse. And anyways, Coster thought that was really funny, and I was always proud of that story. But that was just one weird thing. There's a lot of weird stories. When they moved the prisoners into the second jail, the guards kept a bear, like a pet baby bear, in the first jail for a while. For a very short time. And during an execution, they had a stay. And so that means they weren't going to execute him that day. So hundreds of people showed up, and they went outside and said, listen, we heard from the president, there's going to be a stay of execution. Y'all can go home. No execution day. And apparently the newspaper recorded that nobody left. They thought they were trying to just get him to leave. And so one of the guards said, hey, we'll disperse this crowd. And so they just let the bear out of the jail on the crowd, and it tackled a little kid.
Oh, no.
It didn't hurt him, but it said the newspaper said it just scared him. But I'm like, don't you know the next day when they had like a staff meeting? You know they did. You know they had a meeting afterwards, and there was somebody getting yelled at. There was a safety protocol that was put into play. Like, all right, I want to know which one of you guys.
Who let the bear loose?
I'm not naming names. I'm not saying you're going to get fired, but somebody's in trouble. Like, if I did that now, National Park Service 2024,
can you imagine?
I let a bear loose in the crowd. Cody's probably not going to be working for the Portsmouth National Stories.
Oh my God.
So yeah, we've got a lot of weird stories. Or probably one of my favorite ones too is one of the first involvement with the city. You guys will enjoy this one. The city and the U.S. military. And so the military had left in 24, like I said, to go before Gibson. Great. Well, the tribes are starting to come in, and there was like 4 houses downtown, which is pretty much like right there by the railroad tracks down by the park. Mm-hmm. And so they were building their buildings on the line of Oklahoma and Arkansas, or Indian Territory and Arkansas. And they were selling alcohol to the tribes coming in, the locals coming in. I mean, there was like 4 houses, 3 of them were taverns. I'll give you an idea of what they were doing for fun. So the soldiers that were stationed there were trying to keep an eye on making sure they weren't selling too much bad stuff to, people, and then, breaking too many laws. And anyways, the soldiers didn't have anything to do either. So what did they do? Well, of course, they went to the taverns and got drunk. And one of the guys, they had come back and drunk on duty in uniform. Big no-no. So the officer goes down there, Captain Stewart. He goes down their local tavern, which is owned by the 2 brothers, and Bigelow is the Bigelow Brothers Tavern. He goes in and he's like, listen, you can't be selling my men on duty. And they get in a big fight. Well, they take his cane away. They cane him, they beat him up. They send him back to the fort, which is only about 150 yards away. And apparently his men didn't think too kindly of that. So they rolled a 6-pound full-size cannon down the hill, and within 10 paces of the front door, and in the middle of the night, let a cannonball rip through the middle of their tavern. And didn't kill anybody. But then they came back up with the cannon. They're like, hey, your men shot a cannon at our tavern. What are you going to do about it? And his response, because who they had to complain to, but the guy they just beat up. And he said, they must have been drunk on your alcohol, your wares, he says. There's nothing I can do about it. And they got away with it. And so the first interaction between the federal government and the city of Fort Smith is artillery fire. So there's your Fort Smith, Discover Fort Smith.
Wow, you are just full of fun facts.
When you work somewhere for the same place for 16 years, you accumulate I am a cornucopia of useless information.
But do you feel like you're continuously learning? Like even after 16 years? Like,
yes, I can't learn one thing about even one person and not feel like I've not just hit the tip of the iceberg with everything. There's hundreds of books written about this. I'll never know it all. If I even get 1% of it, I've done more than most. And that's, which is one of the fun things about being here and working there, is I never feel like I'm bogged down to one story, or even not to, take away from any of the other sites, but like a battle or something like that, where it's just like a 1-day engagement or something, or 2 days or whatever. But like here, we got 80 years of history. Mm-hmm. That's tens of thousands of their times people's, and then hundreds of thousands of ours, and how it affected us. I'm never bored. I have lots of fun talking about all kinds of stuff. There's nothing we can't connect to. Like I said, I could go on and bore you guys too.
What are the like day-to-day duties of a park ranger?
Yeah.
And so Wow, man, if you walk in, opening the buildings up, getting the museum stuff. I mean, it's a museum, so we deal with that. A lot of people think, like when I say I work at like national park, they think I'm like outdoors. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
think of like a
protecting trees
horse and like a
animals.
hat.
And those are the good days where I get to ride around doing Civil War reenactments and on a horse in a hat. But most of the time, I mean, I'm in a museum, and so they'll be like, "What kind of tree is that?" And I'm like, "That's a good question, and I don't know."
Let
Wrong
me get out
cowboy.
my iPhone
Google
and take
it.
a
I was
picture
like,
with
"Let's look at
AI.
this. That cannon is partially made of wood. Let's talk about the cannon. It's a tree, right? But no, it's so I'm indoors most of the time. But between running the museum, protecting that resource, and those things, doing a lot of public programming for students and schools and the public who comes and goes at national park. So we see people from all over the nation, which is a lot of fun because you get to meet cool people from everywhere, which is pretty neat. But at the same time, I mean, my special stuff, I'm the volunteer coordinator, so I get to work with, 100 amazing people. Some of them know way more than I do about certain subjects, and they're awesome. We're just a bunch of nerds. And it's great. At the same time, I mean, I'm also the living history guy and the historic weapons. So we, for programming, get to shoot cannons and muskets and ride horses around and hit stuff with sabers. And like I said, I'm living my 8-year-old self. Like,
Yeah.
Have you always been interested in history ever since you were a kid, or is this something that developed later? Or
yes, I'm a hardcore history nerd.
Yeah.
If any of my classmates from school are watching this or ever listen to it, they'll be like, he was a nerd, and he was like 7 years old. I think
My
I got
oldest
this.
is like that.
Oh yeah,
so.
yes. It's I tell people, like, there's jobs out there for people like us.
Yeah.
There's a way to make a living at this. I think I was in second grade. I was 7 or so when I got really big into Civil War history.
Oh, yeah.
But what got me into that was cowboy movies. Watching John Wayne and wanting to ride horses around. And then I remember seeing my first packet of like Civil War toy soldiers, and I'm like, I asked my mom, like, what is this? Why are these cowboys shooting each other? And mom was like, oh, it's Civil War. I was hooked. That was it. I was in, and that was all. So yes, I've always been into history and stuff like that. And so yeah, no, it's paid off. Who would have thought?
Well, I was going to say, did you always want a career in history? Did you know you wanted to be a park ranger, or?
So I started as a kid. I wanted to be a teacher and be a history teacher. And even though people are like, oh, you're a park ranger. Well, what's a park ranger? You teach people about history in a classroom that's outdoors or indoors about the original objects. I'm a teacher. It's just a different type of classroom. So and different ages. We deal with kindergartners to folks who are retired. And so it's kind of a different skill set to be able to talk to different groups about, which is fun at times. But anyways, no, when I was in 6th grade, I came down to the park. And they were shooting cannons. Now, y'all might know Tom Wing.
Yeah.
Tom?
Oh, yeah.
Love
Tom.
me some Tom Wing.
Yeah, he's
man.
great.
Professor at the university there. When he was there, he was working seasonally at the park. And then he was, during the school year, working as professor at the University of Fayetteville. So, summertime, they're shooting cannons. I'm a little 6th grade kid with a little Civil War cap on with my mom, and we come out there on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, one or the other, and we go up there and they're shooting the cannons, and when they shoot, the little priming friction tube gets shot out of the back when it shoots off. And he picked it up and found it in the grass and gave it to me. Now, he didn't know who I was. I was just a little kid who showed up because I was wearing my little Civil War cap. So he gives me that thing. I still have it. It's still there, so in my house. So anyways, or my mom has it anyways. But I remember him talking to students that he was giving bonus points to. And at that, I was like, wait, I could do this for a living?
Yeah.
I could talk about history and shoot cannons and then get other people interested. This is awesome. And right then and there, I was done. I want to be a history teacher. I want to shoot cannons. This is great. And I was in secondary education in college, and then they swapped out, and they actually had, at the time, they had a full bachelor's degree in historical interpretation, and Tom Wing was heading it up. And so I walk in his class. I'm like, what's interpretation? What is this? And he's like, oh, you're going to shoot cannons at parks. I'm like, I'm in. So I swapped out degrees. I was like, this is great. And I told him that later. It took me a while to tell him sometime that semester. I was like, you don't know it, but you're the reason I'm here. And so now I have his old job at the park, which is kind of cool. So now he and I shoot guns together. And
he still volunteers. I see him doing stuff all the time.
So he's with me. And Tom and me are good friends. He's one of my best friends. We have a great time. So it's So yes, to answer your question, kind of a teacher in that regards, doing that. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a good job.
But I mean, that just goes to show like how the importance of exposure.
Yes.
And why it can be important to bring kids to like historic museums, the Museum of History, to the Art Museum, because it just gives you a bigger picture of the world.
Yeah. And
what you can do in the world.
Maybe inspiring the next Ranger Cody.
That's right.
There you go.
You never know. I mean, we always talk about that in our line of work, and teachers will tell you the same thing. I mean, you plant a seed, you don't always know or see it grow to fruition. But here, I mean, there's not a lot of kids these days that are interested in history, but you don't know all the time. You don't know those little kids that come in school groups of 100, which one or two is like, this is really cool to them. Or you might make one or two of those kids really inspired with that. And you never know. I mean, if I've done my job, then if nothing else, they won't come back and hurt the place because they think it's neat enough. Awesome, great. Or someday they'll come bring their kids, so they'll visit or volunteer, which is, I think, the height of stewardship. You're not getting paid for it, but you're taking care of it. You care enough about it to take care of it, kind of thing. But yeah, so it's always important to expose kids and to those type of things and give them. You never know. I mean, if my mom probably didn't know at that time that I'd be doing that, and working for the Park Service, they pay us in sunsets and memories, but we're happy. It's a good job.
And cannons and firing cannons.
Yes, that's if they said, we will not pay you except in black powder, I'll be like, I'm in.
Yeah.
Kids, I'm going to have to take a second job to feed y'all. But Dad's going to get to shoot cannons.
Some of my favorite photos are capturing the cannons being fired there, and of course of you, but we could talk about that later.
I thought you were talking about me on the horse.
On the horse. But I just love getting to see that. How often do you guys do that?
We do that mostly several times in the spring and several times in the fall. When we're in full Civil War uniform, stuff like that. No one wants to do it in the wintertime because let's be honest, we're Southerners. We don't want to go outside when it's 50.
Yeah.
It threatens snow in 2 weeks, and we're like, buy all the milk and eggs and bread and prepare for the apocalypse. But in the summertime, we also don't want to die in more uniforms. So spring and fall, we'll go shoot some more. And that's a lot of fun to go do that. And we do have some cool programming we do with those cannons. And I've never had anybody like, cannons. It's like cannons.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like, who doesn't want to shoot a cannon? That's why I know if I can be friends with somebody or not. But if the answer is no, I'm like, get out of here. I don't need that kind of negativity in my life. Anyhow.
You've referenced previously the fact that Fort Smith's history is gritty.
Yes.
There's some really dark things that happened here. And how do you guys go about, researching and making sure that everything that you're doing is accurate? And what's the importance of telling these stories
correctly?
Yeah, correctly.
That's a very good point. There's so many things. If you watch movies, and I'm going to come back to that. You think about like movies or like common media culture, that we see in Westerns or any historical films. I get it. There's the entertainment factor they want to stretch and all those things, and that's fine. But I don't work in the entertainment business. That's not my job.
You're very entertaining.
Well, we try to entertain. Like I said, those vegetables in the casserole. But at the same time, there's been so much myth and mythology that if we aren't honest, when people see the badge and see a national park ranger, we'll just say ranger for a second. On the idea of that, if you go to Yellowstone and you talk to a park ranger there, you expect them to tell you the truth about an animal or a geyser or, a tree or whatever else. They're the authority. If they got the badge on, the flat hat, they're telling you the truth. And, we like to say we're one of the happy government agencies, where your tax dollars hard at work. We're actually really trying. But at the same time, it's the same thing here. And there's some groups, especially like you think about like the tribes that come in that are very invested in those stories. We have a lot of myth and mythology in the Western stuff, the hanging judge myth of Judge Parker, he hung everybody. He's done terrible things. He wanted to hang people. And then you're like, oh, he didn't actually. Well, that's a neat little tidbit. And that might mean something to the Parker family. But if you're going to get something wrong on tribal stories or cultural stories, even more so. We've been given a pretty big, job to do, and a very important one of protecting not just the fun facts of Fort Smith, but people's lives. I mean, they're not here to defend themselves anymore. So so the fact that we're still telling their stories and trying to do it accurately. I mean, there's not a culture on earth that doesn't talk about the importance of honesty and forthrightness, and people deserve that. The American public deserves that. Imagine if you knew that the National Park Service did nothing but lie to you. I mean, how awful would that be? Or abuse their stuff. And if we did lie, it would be an abuse of our like I said, our stewardship goals. So if we do that and the public trust us, and I hope they do, we're trying very hard. I'm not saying that we don't get things wrong on occasion. I know that I've read books and I look back and I'm like, oh, well, that little figure or fact was wrong, and then I change it. I mean, that's common occurrences. I mean, I don't care if you're in what business you're in, you're constantly growing and expanding your knowledge. You mentioned constantly learning more. Well, that's the same thing in our business. We learn more stuff. We try to delve in more, and so yes, it's very important that we do that. Maybe that's a roundabout. I don't know if I answered your question completely, but maybe word salad that for a minute. But yeah.
Cool.
So do you get people from all over that come and visit the historic site?
We do. It's one of the fun things, but yeah, I mean, it's a national park. So, they come on 40 and they see the signs, or we get a lot of people who, they're parkies, they hit everywhere in the Park Service.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's East Coast, West Coast, or a fort or a natural site, Yellowstone to a fort site, they're coming here and they want to come, see the site and everything. So yes, we get people from all over, which is fun. To hear all the different accents, and not just in the country. I mean, we get people all over the world. We get a lot of folks from Germany coming in. They love Western history, so we get a lot of folks into that. But we meet people from all over. They stop by, and they may be on the way to somewhere else. But we have, and that's a lot of. I'm not trying to say Fort Smith's a flyover town because it's not. I cannot tell you how many people we have come that are like, we came for this. I mean, you're a national park, but not only that, it's not just us, but my goodness, I can't think of a town that has more museums than us.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're interested in the history of anything mid-America, Fort Smith, Arkansas has got it.
Yeah.
I mean, not only this beautiful museum we're in, which is a top-of-the-line art museum, but then, the Museum of History is right across the grounds from us. They cover more of the city's history than we do. It overlaps, but they've got an amazing amount of research and knowledge and artifacts and stories. And you can ride the trolley and learn all about that stuff. And a lot of trained guys and gals come in. But then, of course, Miss Laura's is neat. I remember going there as a kid, which was kind of interesting. I'm surprised my mom took me there as probably an 8-year-old. Those of you who know Miss Laura's.
It's now referred to as Miss Laura's Brothel Museum. Right. So that gives a little more context to why he was shocked his mother
It took me about 5 minutes as I was looking around on the tour, and I was like, oh, okay, I get this now. I was like, Mom, this is an interesting choice. But no. But then, you've got, my goodness, like I said, all the Clayton House is amazing. And then now the Marshals Museum, that thing is a behemoth. It's huge. So
it's beautiful too.
It is. The structure itself is almost worth coming down and seeing.
Chaffee has a
the
museum.
Chaffee Museum. My goodness. We cover such a broad range of time and subjects that, when I first started working in the Park Service, like I said, I've been there 16 years. I remember people coming in and saying, oh, I'm staying here like today. We're heading to Little Rock or Kansas City or Dallas or Oklahoma City, one north, south, east, west, whatever. But now everybody's like, you have so much to do. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because they're staying overnight. Yeah. There's too much to do here in one day. And if you got somebody that's historically minded, there's so many museums to go see, but then park somewhere at a local state park or local park and go hiking. Go to Mount Magazine. Go to, right up the road to Lake Fort Smith. And you're down the Ouachitas. You can go either way you want to go and see all kind of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Use this kind of a base operations to go see all kind of things. And so it's become a multi-day town.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome.
You have young kids, right?
Yeah. 6 and 3, yeah.
Why have you decided to raise your family here in Fort Smith and stay really here?
This is.
I know you love history, but it's got to be more than.
This will always be home. But even if I wasn't from here, I would have chosen somewhere, either Fort Smith or something very similar to it. It's one of the lowest cost of living places you can still be. So y'all know my wife, Casey. My wife works at the Marshals Museum. Shout out to my wife. And she she's from Hawaii. So you want to talk about not from here, like 4,000 miles away from anything. When her folks first visited, like, you're in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, no. Hawaii is in the middle of nowhere. Okay? But that's why you pay to live in paradise. I mean, it's amazing over there. But at the same time, when she first came here and just the years living here, we've been married 7 years. I dote on it because I'm from here and I see it. And at the times, I think I'd lost sight of it until I got married, until I had kids. The schools here are great. And we're homeschooling, but at the same time, like the cooperation between the people and the families here is great. There's a reason we're not, somewhere else. This is home in that regards. We have a good rate support system, but at the same time, it is so. How does she put it? Like, being from Hawaii, when she came here, it's like everybody's so polite, everybody's so warm, everybody's so welcoming, and there's Jesus on billboards and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a very close-knit community. People are very kind. And I hear that too at the park. People come in to visit and they're like, everybody waves at you here.
That's right.
Everybody opens the door for you.
Like
My wife makes fun of me because I wave at everybody, and she goes, "Do you know who that was?" Not a clue. Nope. But I always wave.
Yes, straight up. Me too. It's the same thing. I'll wave at people. And what I forget sometimes, like in this park ranger uniform, and I'll wave at people and they're like, oh, it's a park ranger. And then I'm not. And I continue to do it. And then some people are like,
why is that guy waving?
Why is that guy waving at me? But I do that on the road all the time. And in fact, I think I don't mind saying this, I think we have become, I expect politeness out of this town, so much so that if I ever don't get it, which is almost a rarity, I get upset about it.
You're like, hey, excuse me. I waved at you.
I opened the door for you and I didn't get a thank you. I let you out in traffic and you didn't give me the wave. Yeah. I was like, Rugged's racing. I was like, rude. Be careful, And so, no, I'm kidding. But no, it's like that everywhere I am, I promise. Yeah, my little farm truck, you can tell if it got hurt or not, though. But I get away with that mess. But it is, people are just so easygoing here, so polite. And everybody, like I said, waves going down the street with all fingers. And it's really great. And like I said, I'm not saying they aren't polite or mannerisms in Hawaii, they are, but it's just a different feeling here. And I travel all over the country. The Park Service and go do a lot of trainings and travel and do stuff and help out at the parks. And I don't see that everywhere else. There's a reason why I'm here. There's been chances to go to other parks and leave. And one, I love Fort Smith National Historic Site and the story there. I wouldn't want to leave there to begin with, but this is home and people are good here. I mean, there's a reason to stay. I know that, a lot of people, I don't know, growing up in school, everybody's like, oh, I can't wait to leave home and stuff. And then you see the people who stay here and they're like, man, this is great. We start businesses, we fall in love, we start homes and raise families and become integral portions of our communities. Yeah. And I like that. Getting older, I'm in my late 30s now, and that's kind of becoming more important to me, I think, as a family man and a guy with 2 kids, 2 little girls, that my goal is for them to outshoot every little boy in town. I'm partly there. So, like I said, they can quote John Wayne.
I believe they will.
So, we
Annie Oakley's.
And you betcha, little mutton busting little fools. And they're great little kids. They've already got ponies and 22 rifles. They're living the little Arkansas Fort Smith dream.
That's great.
Well, that's cool. But okay, so you've mentioned several museums and sites and like historical things. Like, for somebody who wanted to come and spend a weekend here, who's a history buff, give me an itinerary, Cody. Tell me, where should they go? But not only that, like, what should they hit up in between?
Oh, yeah. Great.
Like restaurants.
For instance, your wife's family, they come to town.
Yeah. What do you guys do?
Oh, man. Yeah. So that's a great, that's super. No, you'll never lack for things to do on a weekend. Like, let's say that you came in on Friday night or Saturday morning or something like that to Fort Smith and you're visiting. Not going to lie, you should come to see me first at the Fort Smith National Historic Site.
You're really one of the first things you pull.
Really,
if you're coming from Oklahoma.
If you're coming off 40, you're getting off the bridge and you're coming to see us. So just
and honestly,
turn right.
You are the first place my husband and I came to.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Like, as far as like visiting the museums.
I'm embarrassed about how long it took me to get over there.
But you're here now.
I am.
You've been there multiple times. I can't tell you how many times I've seen programs like, there's Josh.
Yeah.
So no, it's great. We love the support from our community partners and everybody. It makes our job that much more fun. And two, I will say this too, it is very pleasant and wonderful. I mean, like I said, I've been here 16 years at the park, grew up here, but like of how supportive all the community heads are of this. It's not like Fort Smith, it's like Fort Stinking Smith, and we all love it. I mean, everybody wants to do good here and see things grow in the community. Anyways, that didn't answer your question, but that's a side note. So I would say come to us first, because if you park downtown, hit some of the historic sites. Come see the national park site, then get your history of Fort Smith. Plus, I mean, most of us in the museum world, especially, I mean, we've got maps and brochures and things to tell you about. So even if you didn't know and you just showed up, I could say, okay, here's the top 5 or 10 things to go see, over the next couple of days. So you wouldn't have any trouble planning a weekend trip to Fort Smith. Come see the National Historic Site, park by us, walk across the street, go see the museum at the Fort Smith Museum of History. Go get a Coke float made in front of you at the Coke fountain, which is super good. Their cherry Cokes are unbelievable. And then go see them, go ride the trolley downtown and everything and see that. Walk just a couple blocks, and go see Miss Laura's, of course. And then, I mean, if you do those, that'll be a big chunk of the day. But if you want something to eat or lunch, there's tons of great places on Garrison, all within walking distance of us. If you're willing to walk even just a couple of blocks, the ribs over there at Neumeyer's is still some of my favorite places. And of course, I can't, my goodness, you could probably just make me live in Rolando's and I'd probably be just fine.
Yeah.
Love me some Rolando's or Las Americas too and places like that. So good.
Delicious.
And then Fort Smith has some of the best pho in the country.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that we have so many refugees post-Vietnam War that settled here and stayed here and started restaurants here. There's TV shows that come and visited Fort Smith about the pho that's downtown. Like, come on, guys, it's phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
I didn't think about that when I said it. I did not think about that. But there's your next pho restaurant. Cool. That'd be a great name for a restaurant. That's a good one.
You'll put that in your back pocket.
Yeah, I was like, put that back there. Cody Faber quit Berkshire, started phenomenal.
Your boss is starting to sweat.
You're like, oh no, what's going on down here? But no, there's tons of great places to eat downtown or within us. I mean, people ask us, what's there to go eat? I'm like, I'll give them a list of things. But I mean, there's within 10 minutes of us, to the first part of Towson, to a little bit down Rogers and this part of Garrison into this closer portion of Rogers, 10 to 15 minutes away. You can get every, food item that is anything from, your chain businesses to your private mom and pop shops and really high end, great food. I mean, nothing to scoff at, especially for a small southern town. It's fantastic. I almost said phenomenal again. But at the same time, I mean, but then you hit that. Of course, the Marshall Museum is worth half a day more. I mean, that's on the conservative side, I think. I mean, everybody's got different, time or maybe energy they want to read. I mean, if you go with me, I'm going to read everything. So you may not want to go to a museum with me. Don't watch.
That's how I am too.
Yeah,
I'm a reader.
Don't watch historical movies with me either. I'll ruin those for you and be like, that's wrong. That gun didn't exist. That saddle's historically inaccurate and stuff like that. And my wife's like, shut up. I'm like, that gun didn't work like that.
You should just make a PowerPoint to show next to the movie.
Oh man, yeah.
So that it tells all the things you're thinking.
That would be an interesting YouTube channel.
Well, I did a fact and fiction on True Grit, and that was literally what it was. It was like, every little point of True Grit and everything they got wrong and right.
Ranger Cody deconstructs westerns.
There's your next podcast. I was like, minute 3, 33 seconds in, see that gun? Didn't exist at the time. And the thing is, there's enough gun people that'd be like, he's right. That's right.
He'd be like, preach, Cody.
Yeah, tell us why that's wrong. There'd be enough people to do that. I wouldn't be alone. This is Fort Smith, Arkansas. Okay, I'd make a killing with that. See, there's besides that in the restaurant, I could make a living. So that's worth a half a day to go see, at least. Again, conservatively, depends on how much you want to read and how much you want to see.
And that's another national museum.
It's privately owned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a private 501c3, but it is. it's national as in how big it is and how good of a story they tell. I mean, it's fantastic. And plus it's a national story. It's a federal story about a federal law enforcement agency. And a lot of people think like they're just getting like the Old West view of it. And then you realize it goes back to George Washington creating them, all the way up to modern U.S. Marshals and how they interact. So you get the, you in so many things in history, we read a quote or we see an old black and white picture. But then in this, you get to go to the Marshall Museum, you see people who are still sometimes in the field being interviewed and the story's still going. People forget that. It's neat. It's a neat portion of that story in that. But then there's the Clayton House. For those of you who don't know the Clayton House, and you should, William Clayton was the prosecuting attorney for Judge Parker for many years. And so he had a home over on 6th Street, and awesome site. They give tours through it. It's phenomenal. You go get married there, go, have your parties there, but at the same time, the history of the site, and it's a home. So it's a lot of emotional moments. It's a really neat place. And then Chaffee Crossing and the museum out there is growing. And I know they're doing a lot out there right now. So, so I mean, if you hit those and just the little stuff like that, I mean, just the history stuff, but go see the Jan Huckabee Nature Center.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like I said, all around us, I mean, using Fort Smith, let's say you stayed at a hotel here in Fort Smith and you're like, I want to go hiking. Well, 30 minutes down the road is Lake Fort Smith. Go hike there on those Overland Star. I mean, it's phenomenal. And, go south and go see the Washitaws. There's Arkansas State Parks all around us.
Yeah, Mount Magazine.
It's
I know.
Fantastic.
I love it.
I work with the National Park Service. I don't have to dote on the State Park Service, but Arkansas State Parks are top 3 in the nation. If you don't believe me, fight me. Come talk to me about it.
I love how you look directly in the camera for that. You're like, come fight me.
I'm right. It's somebody from Oregon is going to come in here and be like, and I'm like,
hey, but they came to Fort Smith.
Yeah, that's true. I got a cannon. Just remember that. But at the same time, I mean, the Arkansas State Parks are fantastic. I mean, and like I said, I don't have to say that. They're just that good. And not every park in our state can brag that, but Arkansas State Parks are fantastic. And so, I mean, you can go see Mount Magazine, and Petty Jean, not too far from us, or head down to Little Rock on 40 and go see, Little Rock High, and there's museums down there. Or, you're only a couple hours from that. You're an hour and a half from Tulsa. You can go up to Fayetteville if you want to, and go see
Eureka Springs.
Eureka Springs south of us,
and even Siloam Springs
or north
cool.
of us. Siloam Springs cool, and then Hot Springs south of us.
Yeah,
I got Eureka Springs, Hot Springs reversed there for a second, but Eureka Springs is fantastic, and Hot Springs and national parks, state parks, just oodles and gobs of them. I mean, if you settled in Fort Smith for a couple of days and use it as a base operation to kind of see other things within, let's say, an hour and a half of you, an easy drive, nothing too, or you can be almost every major city around us, within
couple hours.
A couple hours. I mean, it's done. It's easy
peasy. We are in a great location.
And what's fun is you can visit, but you don't have to live in those big cities. There, I said it. I like Dallas. I want to live in Dallas. I like Kansas City. I don't want to visit it. Want to eat their barbecue. Don't want to live downtown. But anyway, so here you can kind of see all those things, kind of use that as a base and kind of see stuff. So if you're planning a weekend, I mean, man, from Friday night to Sunday evening when you head home,
you can pack it in.
You will pack it in. You won't be going back to the hotel room going, what else is there to do? You will be like, do we have time to fit this in? Let's get the kids and come back next month kind of thing. So we get that a lot. We get that enormous amount. A lot of people come in, they're like, we had no idea you had so much here. We're like, I know. Tell your friends.
But now you do, so tell everyone.
Yeah, that's right. We do parties. Tell your friends and families. Literally. Some places.
No.
Well, that's one of the reasons we're doing the podcast is to let people know.
That's great. That's awesome. We appreciate that very much. We want to see a lot of people. I mean, that's one thing about the Park Service is we deal on visitors, and in the American public, you're paying your taxes, come see us, and we work for you guys, the National Park Service. So we love to see people in there, and we talked about a minute ago, the politeness factor here. Same thing goes with customer service. I mean, the Park Service and state parks and national parks and museums are supposed to be like the best service you'll ever get anywhere in the world. I mean, if you want to sit here and talk to me for 2 hours about history, I will answer. I will stand there until my voice gives out. And I will answer every question you can think of, from the meaning of life to what year this happened on a certain date, whatever. Doesn't matter.
The meaning of life.
Depends on what you want. It depends on how long you got.
I don't know
how long your podcast is.
What is the meaning of life? Let us tell us, please.
So we try to deal with, we try to be the good, happy people. And I'm not the only one who does that. I mean, all the museums you go to around here are fantastic. The service they'll give you, and the questions they answer, and what you see in here, and not only the museums, but the people downtown, the businesses, and the people who work here in the city and stuff, is they're so passionate about this.
And there's a lot of synergy, between sites.
Yes.
I mean, I saw that firsthand this year with the Fall Fest.
Yeah.
I mean, that was so cool.
I love the festival.
I love the Fall Festival.
Yeah, and this is your baby. It's
my baby. I
you
love the
started
Fall
that,
Festival.
And this year it was huge, and
was.
everybody really worked together.
It was fantastic.
All the historic sites and stuff.
It was unbelievable how the magnitude of it, and the fact that we all did it together. So I remember coming as a kid and going downtown. They had Heritage Fest and stuff downtown, and they'd have stuff at the museums and stuff just on the downtown and by the amphitheater and things like that. And all the cool reenactors and the cannons and I was like, wow, this is really neat. I remember that as a kid. And again, one of those things that inspired me. And then later, when they said, hey, we should do a signature event for our park, just us. And I was like, okay, I bet we could get Museum of History and Trial Museum involved. That'd be kind of cool. And so we did. We had this cool, fun event, had a couple thousand people show up, and we're like, well, that was much bigger than we thought it was going to be. And then we're like, hey, guys, how about we do all this? And then post-COVID, everybody was so gung-ho about getting outside, which was great, that we saw a big boost in visitation. And people were wanting to get outdoors. And then right now, you're right. All the sites came together and worked with each other. One of my favorite things about the whole event is all of us sitting in the same room, all the leaders of the local community and sites in the city, sitting down together and going, okay, how can we make this better? How can we make this work? What can we do for you guys? What can you help us out on? And it worked. And then you saw thousands of people downtown.
Yeah.
And, enjoying, the sights and the sounds and all the, the vendors and the museums. And, I was very proud as much as, our event went off. We have awesome volunteers. I can't take credit for the people who show up and do amazing things. They're their own story, and they deserve a trophy each. But at the same time, what I was impressed by is how much, like you said, synergy between the sites and how everybody worked together to make this great. It wasn't just one museum. It wasn't just one person pushing this. It was everybody working together, which was really nice. It's great and considering that got pulled off with, 20 some odd people working together, the leaders, which you don't always see that everywhere.
Right.
That's true.
So
We can do so much together.
Yes.
And supporting each other. I mean, and there was a little bit of everything there.
Yep.
I mean, you had the history, you had the reenactments, you had the museums open, you had the soda fountain open.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
trucks.
there's
Food
food trucks,
trucks.
there
There
were
was a car
vendors,
stuff going on.
Regional Art Museum, where we're at right now, they had a little family event there. So,
It was
thanks
great.
for making that happen and
Spirit
bringing
idea.
everybody together.
This was great.
Really,
It was nice to kind of give away some of the ownership of that. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a very positive way of everybody saying, hey, Cody, we can take this from here and let's go do this. And I'm like, this is what you always wanted to happen. And it did.
and it's happening.
It's happening. And I was like, this is great. Everybody's talking to each other. Years ago, that was year 10. We actually ran the Fort Smith Volunteer Fair at the same time as that. And that was year 10 for that. And that was really one of my goals when I first started that, was trying to get all the sites to talk to each other. And we were like, would it be neat if we all did something together? And the bigger the pie, the bigger the pieces. And nobody in this, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. If I hear one more person say there's nothing to do in Fort Smith, I'm going to die. I don't know.
Come fight him. Come fight him.
Fight me. But at the same time, no, I am just so, there's so much. I mean, whether it's during the daytime in museums and sites, or family-friendly events, or the evening concerts and everything else. I mean, we constantly are doing stuff. My wife and I are always looking for a sitter so we can go have fun, which is a good problem to have. Imagine if you're like, man, there's no. We're like, hey, can you watch our kids for the night so we can go, go to this concert or go to this play? Or, hey, the kids, let's go saddle up and come with us, for some things. And so, no, there's never a shortage of things to do downtown and see things. But yes, it was great to see everybody work together. I love that. I love that you don't have some of us working hard to make that happen, and then the rest is like, eh. It's like
Right.
everybody's on board right now. I feel like we're in like the golden years of this, and I hope that continues. I hope we don't look back and say those were the good years. I hope it's like, wow, remember that started kind of thing.
Yeah.
It continued on.
Love it.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us,
Sure.
Cody. Like, this has been so much fun. It's always fun to talk to you because you're just so animated.
Oh
and you're
yeah,
so
animated.
knowledgeable.
I'm a little,
No, I love it.
doll character figures.
No, it's
Smiling tax dollars hard at work, guys.
No, it's just so much fun. It's always like a good time.
Thank you,
and
guys.
thanks for sharing about what you do and some stories with us. And just thanks for all that you do here in Fort Smith to share our history and everything. So,
Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Love Fort Smith very much. As I was thinking about this today because I looked over some of the stuff that y'all were like, hey, where's some of the stuff we're talking about? And one of the things I always, as a historian with the city of Fort Smith, from 1817, when the first, I guess you can talk about the first fort being here and the city kind of starting after that to date, all of our chapters of this and all the stories are all in books somewhere. I mean, I don't care if it's the 20th century, the 19th, or whatever. I mean, there's always those little chapters of this is what happened during the 1870s. This is how what followed up in War I, or this is how this epidemic or the tribes removal stories affected this city, and all those little things that nuanced us into us. And so I'm very proud that we're in this chapter right now. But I hope this, a few chapters from now, they're going to be like, that was a great chapter.
Yes.
I'm very proud to be on this chapter right now, and maybe have my name as a footnote. Cody Faber shot cannons and talked
and loved it.
and loved every minute. And they're like, that guy right there, he's got it going on. But at the same time, this is a great time to be in Fort Smith, and I'm very proud of that. I've loved your mom. I'm 38, so this is the best I've seen it. Like the energy behind it, and I'm so proud that we're all together on this little chapter, making this even better for the next one. So,
Well, I mean, part of that's people like you coming and bringing us together, right? Like, so thank you for that.
thank
and
you. I appreciate that.
Thanks
Thank you
again
very
for
much.
being on
You
with
bet.
us.
My absolute pleasure. Anytime.